The first laugh came before Evelina Hart even crossed the ballroom. It was small, polite, almost musical. That made it worse. It slipped from behind a painted fan in the north corner of Penmere Hall, where 6 young ladies in fresh silk gowns stood beneath a garland of winter roses, pretending not to stare at the girl in the faded brown dress. Evelina heard it. Everyone heard it. The violinists continued playing. The candles continued burning. The gentleman continued pretending the room had not just sharpened its teeth around one woman who had arrived with nothing but dignity. Evelina kept walking. Her shoes were damp from the courtyard. One ribbon had frayed near the ankle. Her gloves had been washed so many times the fabric had thinned at the fingertips. Her dress had once been a warm chestnut color, but years of brushing, rain, and careful mending had faded it to the dull shade of old tea. She knew how she looked. She had known before she left the cottage. She had known when her aunt stood in the doorway with folded arms and said, "You cannot go to Penmere looking like that." Evelina had answered, "Then I shall go looking like myself." Now, standing beneath 300 candles and 100 judging eyes, she discovered that being oneself in public required more courage than she had expected. Near the refreshment table, Lady Beatrice Vale leaned toward her cousin. "Is that Miss Hart?" Her cousin lifted her eyeglass. Surely not. Miss Hart was once considered pretty. A few nearby ladies laughed. Evelina did not turn. She kept her chin level and walked toward the long table where the charity subscription book had been placed. The evening was not merely a ball. It was a winter relief gathering for poor tenants displaced by the floods. Every family of rank in the county had come to sign their names and pledge money where others could see them do it. Evelina had not come to dance. She had come with £5 wrapped inside a handkerchief. £5 her late father had saved in a locked box marked, "For hard days." These were hard days. Not for her alone, but for the families sleeping in barns since the river took their homes. £5 was not much among dukes, barons, and merchants, but it was nearly everything she had. At the table, Lord Harrogate stood with the subscription book open before him. He was a broad man with pale hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Evelina had known him since childhood. He had proposed to her once, after her father's death, in the same tone one might offer to purchase a failing horse. She had refused. He had never forgiven the insult. "Miss Hart," he said loudly as she approached. "What an unexpected pleasure." Several heads turned. Evelina placed the folded handkerchief on the table. "For the relief fund, my lord." Harrogate glanced at the bundle. How generous. His voice made the word sound dirty. He untied the handkerchief and revealed the coins inside. £5 in mixed silver and gold. His brows lifted. £5. The women near the roses tittered again. Harrogate looked around the room, making sure he had an audience. "My dear Miss Hart, are you quite certain you can spare it? Charity is noble, of course, but one must be careful not to donate the money needed for soap." The laughter this time was louder. Evelina's fingers tightened at her side. She had learned many things since her father died. How to stretch flour with barley. How to mend a sleeve so the tear would not show in candlelight. How to smile when people who once dined at your father's table stopped calling. But she had not learned how to make humiliation painless. She only knew how to stand still until it passed. "Yes, my lord," she said. "I can spare it." Harrogate picked up the pen. "And shall I write your name beside the amount? Miss Evelina Hart, £5. He paused. "Or would you prefer anonymous charity? It might spare you comparison." Behind her, someone whispered, "Poor thing." Another answered, "Proud thing, more like." Evelina looked at the open book. The names above hers belonged to families who had pledged 50, 100, even £200, then smiled as if sacrifice had never touched them. "Write my name," she said. Harrogate smiled. "As you wish." He dipped the pen, wrote slowly, then turned the book just enough for the nearest guests to see the smallness of the number. £5. Beside her name, a little offering made to look like a joke. Evelina stepped back. That was when she felt someone watching her. Not the women, not Harrogate, not the curious guests who enjoyed discomfort when it wore a pretty face. This gaze was different, still, unmoved. She turned slightly. A stranger stood near the far archway that led to the music room. He wore a plain black evening coat without any decoration except a dark signet ring on his right hand. He was not young, not old, perhaps 35. His hair was dark, brushed back from a face marked by restraint rather than softness. He did not smile. He did not look away when she saw him looking. Around him, people seemed uncertain what to do. A few gentlemen nodded to him, but he did not return the greeting. A lady in silver whispered behind her fan. Another looked suddenly nervous. Evelina did not know him, but the room did. The stranger's eyes moved from Evelina's faded dress to Harrogate's laughing mouth, then to the subscription book. Something cold passed over his face. Harrogate noticed him at last. His posture changed, only slightly, but Evelina saw it. The broad shoulders stiffened. The smile became careful. The hand holding the pen lowered. "My lord," Harrogate said, his voice suddenly formal. "I had not realized you had arrived." The stranger did not answer him. He looked at Evelina. "Miss Hart." His voice was low, calm, dangerous in its calmness. Evelina dipped a small curtsy. "Sir." A flicker moved in his eyes, not amusement exactly, but recognition of courage under strain. Then he stepped forward. The guests parted for him without understanding why they were doing it. He stopped beside the subscription table and looked down at the open book. £5, he said. Harrogate gave a little laugh. Indeed, a touching effort. The stranger's gaze lifted to him. Touching? Harrogate's smile faltered. I meant only that Miss Hart's contribution is admirable, considering her reduced circumstances. Reduced circumstances, the stranger repeated. The room fell quiet in layers. The violins stopped one by one, as if the musicians had sensed the danger before the guests did. Harrogate's face flushed. You misunderstand me. I doubt that. Then the stranger did something that changed the room forever. He reached for the dark ring on his right hand. At first, Evelina thought he meant only to adjust it. But no, he turned it once, slowly, and pulled it from his finger. A murmur rose. The ring was heavy gold beneath the black enamel. A ducal crest flashed under the candlelight, a crowned stag beneath 3 stars. Someone gasped. Lady Beatrice's fan slipped from her hand. Harrogate went pale. The stranger placed the ring on the open subscription book, directly beside Evelina's £5. The sound it made was small, a soft final click. Yet every person in Penmere Hall seemed to hear it like a pistol shot. I pledge £10,000, he said. No one moved. In Miss Hart's name. Evelina stopped breathing. Harrogate stared at the ring. My lord. Not my lord, the stranger said quietly. He turned his head, and for the first time the room saw him fully. Your Grace. The words came from old Sir Ambrose near the fireplace. He bowed so quickly his cane nearly slipped. The room followed in a wave. Curtsies, bows, pale faces, lowered eyes. The stranger was not a stranger at all. He was Cassian Wren, Duke of Alderwick, the Duke who had not entered society in nearly 6 years, the Duke whose wife had died under strange circumstances, the Duke who was rumoured to have locked the west wing of his estate and dismissed every servant who mentioned her name, the Duke no unmarried woman was supposed to approach because grief had made him cold and power had made him untouchable. Evelina had heard stories. Everyone had. But stories were thin things compared to the man standing beside her, bare-handed now, his ring lying on the book like a verdict. Harrogate tried to recover. Your Grace, of course. I did not mean any slight to Miss Hart. Cassian looked at him. No? No. Then you meant the room to laugh kindly. Harrogate swallowed. Several women lowered their eyes. Cassian turned to the guests. I have been absent from society long enough to wonder whether manners have changed. Tell me, Lady Beatrice, is it now fashionable to mock a woman's dress while standing beneath a roof warmed by her family's former charity? Lady Beatrice's face turned scarlet. Your Grace, Miss Hart's father paid the doctor's bills for half this county during the fever winter. He buried tenants who could not afford coffins. He opened his grain stores when men of larger fortune locked theirs. His gaze returned to the subscription book. £5 from his daughter may weigh more than 500 from anyone laughing here. Silence. Evelina's throat tightened painfully. No one had spoken of her father like that in years. Not with respect. Not in public. Cassian picked up the pen and wrote beneath her name. £10,000. Then he signed it. Alderwick. He placed the pen down. Miss Hart, he said, turning to her, may I escort you away from this table? She should have refused. She knew that. A poor gentlewoman did not accept the arm of a duke whose name carried scandal like a shadow. But her legs felt unsteady, and her pride was tired. So she placed her gloved hand lightly on his sleeve. He led her through the crowd. No one laughed now. The same women who had looked at her dress now stared at the floor. The gentleman who had smiled at Harrogate's cruelty suddenly found the chandeliers fascinating. At the edge of the ballroom, Evelina tried to withdraw her hand. Cassian stopped, but did not release her until she stepped away herself. "Your Grace," she said quietly, "you should not have done that." "Which part?" "All of it." A faint shadow crossed his face. "I should have done more." She looked up at him. "Why?" The question was on her tongue, but she did not ask it. He seemed to hear it anyway. "Because I watched them hurt you," he said, "and for a moment, I did nothing. That was not your responsibility." "No," he said, "that was my failure." Evelina did not know what to say. Across the ballroom, Harrogate watched them with a face full of injured pride. Cassian noticed. His expression hardened. "You have an enemy in that man." Evelina gave a small, tired smile. "My lord has considered himself my enemy since I refused to become his wife." Cassian's eyes sharpened. "He proposed?" "He offered." "There is a difference." "Yes," she said. "I noticed." For the first time, something like warmth touched his mouth. Not quite a smile. Almost. Then the doors at the end of the ballroom opened, and an elderly woman in a violet turban stepped in with a footman beside her. The room stirred. Cassian's face changed. Evelina saw it immediately. The stillness vanished. Not fear. Something older. Pain. The woman looked directly at him. "There you are, Cassian," she said. "I was told you had finally returned to the living." The guests pretended not to listen. Everyone listened. Cassian's jaw tightened. "Lady Dorothea." The old woman's eyes moved to Evelina. "And you have chosen a companion already." Evelina stepped back. Cassian's voice lowered. "Do not." Lady Dorothea smiled. "My dear boy, I have said nothing cruel. Not yet." The old woman laughed softly, then looked at Evelina's dress. "Miss Hart, is it? How interesting. You look very like someone I once knew." Cassian went still. The air around them changed. Evelina felt it. A secret had entered the room. Lady Dorothea leaned closer. "Tell me, child," she said, "did your mother ever speak of Alderwick House?" Evelina's breath caught. "My mother died when I was 8. "How convenient for the dead," Lady Dorothea murmured. "They leave the living to answer everything." Cassian stepped between them. "That is enough." But Evelina was staring at the old woman now. Alderwick House. She had heard that name before. Not in society. Not from gossip. From her father. Once, years ago, when he thought she was asleep, he had taken a small sealed packet from a locked drawer and whispered to himself, "Alderwick must never know." At the time, she had thought it meant nothing. Now the Duke of Alderwick stood before her like a man guarding a door, and she suddenly understood that the night had not begun with a faded dress. It had begun years before she was born. Lady Dorothea smiled as if she could hear Evelina's thoughts. "Well," she said softly, "this evening may become more interesting than I expected." Cassian did not look away from Evelina. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice controlled but strained, "whatever she says next, you do not have to remain here." Evelina should have left. Instead, she lifted her chin. "I have been laughed at already tonight, Your Grace. I may as well learn why." And across the ballroom, beneath the chandeliers and the listening silence of people who had come for charity and found scandal, the Duke of Alderwick looked at the woman in the faded dress as if she had just walked unknowingly into the center of his ruined past. Lady Dorothea did not reveal the secret in the ballroom. She was far too skilled for that. Cruel people who lack patience are merely loud. Cruel people with patience can ruin a life with timing. She only smiled, lifted her violet-gloved hand to summon a servant, and said, "I am tired. Penmere's candles are too bright, and its guests are too hungry for blood. Cassian, you will call on me tomorrow. Bring Miss Hart if she has courage." Then she left. Not quickly. Not quietly. She moved through the ballroom like an old queen withdrawing from court, leaving confusion behind her as deliberately as perfume. The music did not resume for several minutes. Evelina stood near the archway, her hand cold inside her worn glove. Cassian remained beside her. We had not put his ring back on. The absence of it seemed louder now than its presence had been. People watched his bare hand. They watched her faded dress. They watched the subscription book where her £5 now sat above his 10,000 like a candle beside a lightning strike. "Miss Hart," Cassian said quietly, "I should take you home." She looked at him. "Should you?" A flicker of surprise moved across his face. Then something like respect. "Perhaps I should ask whether you wish to be taken home. That would be better. Do you?" Evelina looked around the ballroom. Lady Beatrice had gathered her sisters into a tight, frightened cluster. Lord Harrogate stood by the punch bowl, whispering sharply to a man in a green waistcoat. Several older ladies pretended to examine flowers while leaning toward every word. If Evelina left now, every carriage ride in the county would be full of her name before midnight. If she stayed, it would be worse. There was no safe choice, only the choice she could bear. "I would like to go home," she said. Cassian nodded once. He did not offer his arm this time. He walked beside her, close enough to shield her from the room, far enough not to claim what she had not given. Outside, the night was bitter. The courtyard lamps burned low. Horses stamped in the cold. The sky was moonless, and the smell of wet stone rose from the ground. Evelina's shawl was thin. Cassian noticed before she could hide the shiver. He removed his black evening cloak and held it out. She looked at it. "No, Your Grace." "Yes, Miss Hart. I cannot accept your cloak." "Then consider it a temporary arrangement between two people who have both had enough of being stared at." Despite herself, she almost smiled. Almost. She took the cloak. It was heavy, warm, lined with dark wool. The scent of smoke, rain, and something faintly like cedar surrounded her when she drew it over her shoulders. Cassian looked away while she fastened it. That small courtesy struck her harder than his defense in the ballroom. Men had often looked at her when she wished they would not. Men had often failed to look at her when she needed help. The Duke of Alderwick had the unnerving habit of seeing exactly enough and then turning his eyes away. A carriage was brought, not hers. She had come in her aunt's hired gig, and her aunt had not waited. Cassian's carriage was black, unmarked except for a small crest near the door. When the footman opened it, Evelina hesitated. Cassian noticed. "I will ride outside." She looked at him sharply. "It is freezing." "Yes. You are a duke. I have survived worse than cold. That is not an answer." "No," he said, "but it is the truth." She studied him. He was serious. He meant to give her the carriage alone to protect her reputation from gossip, though gossip had already wrapped itself around them like smoke. "That is unnecessary," she said at last. "You may sit inside. I am not afraid of you." His expression changed, only slightly, but she saw that the words had reached some locked room inside him. "Most people are," he said. "I am not most people." "No," he said quietly, "you are not." They rode in silence for several minutes. Evelina sat facing forward, wrapped in his cloak, listening to the wheels cutting through wet gravel. Cassian sat opposite her, bare hand resting on one knee, the ring in his other palm. The ring caught faint light whenever the carriage passed a lantern. She looked at it. He noticed. "It belonged to my father," he said. "I did not ask. You wanted to." She looked out the window. "That does not mean I needed an answer." The corner of his mouth moved. "No, it means you are better mannered than I am." The carriage turned onto the narrow road that led away from Penmere Hall. After a moment, Evelina said, "Why did Lady Dorothea ask about my mother?" Cassian's hand closed around the ring. "I do not know. It was a lie." "Not a skilled one." Evelina turned back. "Your Grace." His eyes met hers. The carriage rocked beneath them. At last he said, "There was a woman once connected to my family. Her name was Amara Bell. She served as companion to my mother before I was born. Lady Dorothea believed my father cared for her." "Did he?" "I do not know." "Was Amara Bell my mother?" "No." The answer came too quickly to be false. Evelina let out a breath she had not known she held. "But you think she knew my mother?" Cassian looked down at the ring. "I think there are parts of my family's history that were buried badly, and now I have stepped on the grave." His gaze lifted. That is one way to put it. The carriage fell quiet again. Outside, hedges passed like black walls. Evelina thought of the locked drawer in her father's study, the packet, the words, "Alderwick must never know." "My father had something," she said. Cassian did not move. "A packet. I saw it once when I was a child. It had your family name on it." His face became very still. "What packet?" "I do not know. After he died, many of his papers were taken by creditors. Some were burned by my aunt because she said old documents only attracted old troubles. Cassian looked as though someone had tightened a cord around his throat. What was your father's full name? Dr. Samuel Hart. He closed his eyes. The change in him was immediate and alarming. You knew him, Evelina said. No. Do not lie to me twice in one carriage ride. His eyes opened. There was pain in them now, not anger. I knew of him. He was the physician who attended my wife before she died. Evelina went still. Everyone knew the rumors. The Duchess of Alderwick had died 5 years earlier after a winter illness. Some said fever, some said a fall, some whispered poison, though never where the Duke could hear. Cassian's face had gone pale in the carriage shadows. My father attended her. Yes. Then why would he have your family name sealed in a packet? Cassian looked out into the dark. Because he may have known what killed her. The words sat between them like a third passenger. Evelina felt the warmth of the cloak around her, suddenly too heavy. What killed her? He did not answer at once. When he did, his voice was low. The official record says lung fever. My wife, Seraphine, died in the west wing of Alderwick House after 3 weeks of illness. Your father signed the certificate. But you do not believe it. I believed it because I had to. Then I received a note 2 months after her burial. From whom? Unsigned. What did it say? Cassian's bare hand tightened. It said, ask the doctor what he feared more than death. The carriage slowed. Evelina's cottage appeared ahead, its roofline dark beneath the trees. The small windows were unlit. Her aunt was likely asleep, or pretending to be. The carriage stopped. Neither of them moved. Evelina looked at him. Did you ask my father? I went to find him. And? He had already left the county. She swallowed. Her father had left the county 6 months before his death, and never explained why. He had moved her from one small lodging to another, taken fewer patients, locked his letters, and startled whenever anyone knocked after dusk. At the time, she thought grief had made him nervous. Now she wondered whether it had been guilt or fear. Cassian leaned forward. Miss Hart, whatever your father knew, it may have nothing to do with you. If that were true, Lady Dorothea would not have looked at me as though I were a key. No, he admitted. She would not. A hard, practical thought steadied Evelina. What do you want from me? Cassian's eyes sharpened with something like regret. I want nothing from you. No one wants nothing. Then I want you safe from my family. She almost laughed. It came out thin and tired. Your Grace, 1 hour ago, my greatest danger was public embarrassment. Since meeting you, I have gained a dead duchess, a hidden packet, an old woman who enjoys secrets, and a duke offering protection from his own blood. I am not sure safety is your strongest talent. For a moment, he stared at her. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Not freely, but enough that the grief in his face shifted, and she saw the man he might have been before scandal carved him hollow. It vanished quickly. I deserved that. Yes. The footman opened the carriage door. Cold air rushed in. Evelina removed the cloak. Cassian stopped her. Keep it tonight. No. It is cold. It is yours. You may return it tomorrow. She looked at him. At Lady Dorothea's. If you choose to come, and if I choose not to, then send it back with a servant and lock your door. She held the cloak tighter around herself. Will she tell me the truth? Cassian's expression hardened. She will tell enough truth to wound you and enough lies to guide where the wound lands. Then I should hear her carefully. You do not have to involve yourself. My father already involved me when he hid your name in his drawer. Cassian said nothing. The cottage door opened. Her aunt stood there with a candle, her face pinched in irritation until she saw the carriage. Then her eyes widened. Evelina looked away from the door and back to Cassian. I will come tomorrow. His jaw tightened. I feared you would say that. Then you should have lied better. Again, almost a smile. He stepped down first and offered his hand. She took it. The moment her foot touched the ground, the cottage door opened wider. Aunt Mercy's voice rang through the dark. Evelina Hart, whose carriage is that? Cassian released Evelina's hand at once. Evelina drew herself upright. The Duke of Alderwick was kind enough to bring me home. Aunt Mercy nearly dropped the candle. Cassian bowed. Madam. Aunt Mercy looked from his face to his bare hand to the cloak around Evelina's shoulders. Her expression changed from shock to calculation so quickly It made Evelina's stomach sink. "Your Grace," Aunt Mercy said, suddenly soft. "You must come in from the cold." "No," Evelina said. The word surprised all three of them. Her aunt stared. Cassian's eyes moved to her face. Evelina untied the cloak and handed it back to him. "I will see you tomorrow, Your Grace." He took the cloak slowly. "Tomorrow, then." He stepped back into the carriage. Evelina watched it turn in the narrow lane and disappear into the dark. Only when the sound of wheels faded did her aunt seize her arm. "What have you done?" Evelina pulled free. "Nothing. Nothing. A duke brings you home in his carriage, wraps you in his cloak, and you say nothing. Do you know what this could mean?" "Yes," Evelina said quietly. "Trouble." Her aunt's face hardened. "Do not be foolish. Men like that do not notice women like you unless they want something." Evelina looked down the empty road. For once, she could not disagree. That night, she slept little. At dawn, she went to the small trunk beneath her bed and opened the false bottom her father had built years ago to hide their last coins. The coins were gone, but tucked into the corner, beneath a strip of loose wood, was a folded scrap of paper she had never noticed. Her hands went cold. On the outside, in her father's handwriting, were 3 words. "If Alderwick comes." Evelina sat on the floor in her faded dress as morning light crept over the boards. Then she opened the paper. Inside was only one line. "Do not trust the ring." Evelina read the sentence 6 times before its meaning began to breathe. Do not trust the ring. Not the Duke. Not the family. The ring. She sat on the floor beside her little trunk, the scrap of paper trembling between her fingers. Morning light pressed cold and grey through the cracked window. Somewhere below, Aunt Mercy scolded the kitchen girl for burning the porridge, her voice sharp enough to cut through walls. Evelina did not move. She saw again the ballroom at Penmere Hall, the laughter, the subscription book, the stranger's steady gaze, the moment he removed the Duke's ring and placed it beside her name. That ring had silenced a room. That ring had changed her from an object of mockery into a woman everyone feared to insult. And her father, dead these 2 years, had left one warning. Do not trust the ring. Not long after 9, the Duke's carriage arrived. Aunt Mercy saw it first and nearly tripped over her own hem running to the door. "Evelina!" she hissed up the stairs. "He is here! Make yourself presentable! No, not that shawl, the blue one. It hides the fading better." Evelina looked down at her brown dress. The same faded dress. The same mended cuffs. The same stubborn truth. She folded her father's note and slipped it into her glove. Then she went downstairs. Cassian stood in the narrow parlor, too tall, too dark, too composed for the shabby room. He had not worn the ring. Evelina noticed at once. So did he. "You are looking for it," he said. Aunt Mercy's eyes darted between them. Evelina kept her voice calm. "You are not wearing it." "No. Why?" "Because after last night, I thought it wiser not to carry symbols I did not yet understand." Her hand tightened inside her glove around the hidden note. Aunt Mercy forced a laugh. "How mysterious you both sound. Your Grace, may I offer tea?" "No, thank you." "Perhaps later then." "Evelina, do remember what is proper." Evelina looked at her aunt. "Proper left me standing alone in a ballroom while people laughed at my dress. I will try something else today." Cassian's mouth moved. Aunt Mercy turned crimson. Before she could answer, Evelina walked past her and out to the carriage. The ride to Lady Dorothea's townhouse was quiet, but not empty. Cassian sat opposite her, ungloved hands resting on his knees. Without the ring, his right hand looked strangely vulnerable. There was a faint pale band where the gold usually sat. "You found something," he said. Evelina looked at him. "What makes you say that? You are not frightened today, you are armed." She almost smiled. "With what?" "A pistol." "With knowledge." She turned toward the window. The road curved through bare trees. Frost clung to the hedges. "My father left a note." Cassian went still. "What did it say?" Evelina faced him again. "Do not trust the ring." The words struck him visibly. He looked down at his bare hand. "My father's ring." "Perhaps." "No," he said. "Not perhaps. That ring has passed from duke to duke for generations. Then perhaps the warning is older than you." Cassian was silent for a long moment. At last he said, "There is a hidden compartment in the ring." Evelina's breath caught. You knew. I discovered it after Seraphine died. It was empty. Or you thought it was. His eyes lifted to hers. The carriage stopped before a tall grey house with black railings and windows so clean they reflected the winter sky like knives. Lady Dorothea received them in a room filled with porcelain birds. They stood on shelves, tables, mantels and cabinets. White birds, blue birds, golden birds with painted eyes. The whole room seemed designed to watch. The old woman sat near the fire, in violet silk, a cane across her lap. "How brave," she said when Evelina entered. "The poor do acquire courage when they have nothing left to lose." Cassian's voice hardened. "Begin carefully." Lady Dorothea smiled. "Still giving orders, Cassian, even without your ring?" Evelina saw the Duke stiffen. So Lady Dorothea knew. The old woman's pale eyes moved to Evelina. "Your father was a nervous man. Good physician, poor liar. That is why he ran. My father ran because he was afraid. Your father ran because he was paid, threatened, and then regretted both." Evelina's stomach tightened. "Paid by whom?" Lady Dorothea leaned back. "By Seraphine." Cassian's face went white. "My wife? Oh yes. The dead are always so inconvenient when they begin behaving like people. Your sweet Duchess was not poisoned, Cassian. She was not murdered in her sickbed. She was preparing to leave you." The room went utterly still. Evelina looked at Cassian. He did not move. Lady Dorothea continued, almost lazily. "She discovered something your family had buried, something in the ring, a miniature roll of vellum hidden inside the crest. Your father had placed it there before he died. Seraphine found it while you were in London." Cassian's voice was barely audible. "What was on it?" "Proof that the Alderwick fortune was partly built on stolen trust money. The money meant for widows and children after the northern mine collapse. Your grandfather diverted it. Your father discovered the theft years later, but lacked the courage to expose it publicly, so he hid the confession in the ring." Cassian looked as if every breath hurt. "And Seraphine? Wanted to reveal it? Then why did she not?" Lady Dorothea's mouth tightened. "Because she fell ill." Cassian stepped forward. "You said she was not murdered." "She was not. But something happened." Lady Dorothea looked into the fire. "Seraphine sent for Dr. Hart. She gave him the vellum and told him to keep it safe if anything happened. Your cousin, Lord Ellery, discovered it. He threatened the doctor. He frightened Seraphine. There was an argument in the West Wing. She tried to leave in a storm. She fell on the terrace steps." Cassian closed his eyes. The rumors, the fall, the fever. All of them fragments of one hidden night. "She was alive after the fall," Lady Dorothea said, "but weak. The fever came after. Dr. Hart signed the certificate as lung fever because Ellery promised to ruin him and his child if he wrote anything else." Evelina's heart struck hard. "His child?" "Yes," Lady Dorothea said. "You, Miss Hart." Cassian turned toward Evelina, pain and horror mingling in his face. Lady Dorothea's voice softened, which somehow made it crueler. "Your father took the vellum and fled. He meant to come forward later, I think. Men always mean to be brave later. But later became debt, sickness, fear, and death." Evelina pulled the note from her glove. "Then where is the proof now?" Lady Dorothea's eyes dropped to the paper. For the first time, her confidence faltered. "I assumed your father destroyed it." "No," Evelina said. "He hid things." Cassian's gaze sharpened. "The ring's compartment was empty when I found it. Because your father's confession had already been removed," Evelina said, "by Seraphine, then given to mine." Lady Dorothea's hand tightened on her cane. Evelina looked at the old woman carefully. "You did not bring me here to tell the truth. You brought me here to see whether I had it." Silence. Cassian looked at Lady Dorothea. The old woman's face hardened. "You are cleverer than your dress suggests. And you are less honest than your age suggests." Cassian almost moved between them, but Evelina lifted one hand slightly. "Not yet." She turned back to Lady Dorothea. "You said my father was paid and threatened." "By Lord Ellery, not by you." Lady Dorothea did not answer. "You knew," Evelina said, "all these years. You knew what happened to Seraphine. You knew the family money was stained. You knew my father carried proof. And instead of speaking, you waited." Lady Dorothea's eyes flashed. "I protected this family. You protected its comfort." The words landed. Cassian looked at the old woman, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Where is Ellery?" Lady Dorothea's jaw tightened. "Still in London, Still charming fools. Still living on money better people died needing. Cassian's face changed. It was not rage exactly. It was decision. "We are going to Alderwick House," he said. Evelina turned. "Why?" "Because if your father hid the vellum, he hid it in the one place Ellery would never search." She understood. "My house?" "No," Cassian said. "Mine. Dr. Hart returned once after Seraphine's death. I found his name in the old visitor book. He stayed one night, supposedly to collect unpaid fees. I thought nothing of it then." Evelina's pulse quickened. "He hid it there." "I believe so." Lady Dorothea stood with surprising force. "You cannot open this, Cassian. It will destroy the Alderwick name." Cassian looked at her. The name should have thought of that before it learned to survive on stolen bread. By late afternoon, they reached Alderwick House. It was larger than Evelina expected, older and sadder, built of pale stone at the edge of a dark lake. The west wing stood shuttered. Ivy crawled over the terrace steps where Seraphine had fallen. No servant smiled when they entered. They moved through the house in silence, Cassian carrying a lantern, though there was still daylight outside. He led Evelina to the old west parlor. This was Seraphine's room. Dust lay over everything. A covered piano, a small writing desk, a portrait turned toward the wall. Cassian stopped at the threshold, as if the room still had power to wound him. Evelina stepped inside first. That seemed to help him follow. "What would my father have chosen?" she whispered. Cassian looked around. He was a physician, practical. He would choose somewhere dry, hidden, near enough to Seraphine to mean something. Evelina's eyes moved to the fireplace. Above it was a carved mantle with 3 wooden roses. One rose had a chipped petal. Her father had carved flowers into her childhood toys. He always made one petal uneven, so she would know his work. She crossed the room. Her fingers found the chipped rose. It shifted. A small panel opened beneath the mantle. Inside lay a narrow tin case. Cassian did not touch it. He looked at Evelina. "It is your father's hiding place." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a roll of vellum, a letter, and a small lock of pale hair tied with blue thread. Seraphine's, perhaps. Evelina unfolded the letter first. Her father's handwriting filled the page. "To whoever finds this, I was afraid. That is the truth. I failed the Duchess. I failed the Duke. I failed my own daughter by leaving danger for her to inherit. But I did not destroy the confession. I leave it where conscience may yet find it." Evelina's eyes blurred. Cassian stood beside her, silent. She handed him the vellum. His hands were steady when he opened it. But his face changed as he read. The confession was real. Names, amounts, dates, a theft dressed for decades as inheritance. By nightfall, Lord Ellery was ruined. Not publicly at first. Cassian was too controlled for haste. He sent sealed copies to the magistrate, the trustees of the Mine Widows Fund, and 3 newspapers in London. He enclosed his own statement, not defending the Alderwick name, but condemning it. Lady Dorothea left the county within a week. Lord Ellery fled, then was found. The stolen money was restored from Alderwick funds, with interest so severe that society whispered the Duke had punished himself as much as the guilty. But Evelina did not care about society's whispers. She cared about the letter, her father's confession of fear, his imperfect courage, the proof that he had not destroyed the truth, only hidden it until someone braver could carry it. A month after Penmere Hall, Evelina returned to the ballroom. This time, not for a ball, for the first public meeting of the Restored Relief Trust. She wore the same faded brown dress. Aunt Mercy had begged her not to. Cassian had said nothing when he saw it, only looked at her as he had the first night, steadily, without pity. The room quieted when she entered. Lady Beatrice was there. So was Lord Harrowgate. Neither laughed. Cassian stood at the front beside the subscription table. On it lay the Duke's ring. Repaired. Opened. Empty now of secrets. He addressed the room. "This ring once represented power without accountability. Tonight, it will represent something else." He turned to Evelina. "Miss Hart, will you do me the honor?" A murmur moved through the crowd. Evelina walked forward. Her dress whispered softly around her ankles. Not silk, not fashionable, but clean, mended, and unashamed. Cassian picked up the ring, but instead of putting it on his own hand, he placed it in her palm. Gasps spread. He spoke quietly enough that only those near the table heard. "The first night I saw you, they laughed at your dress. I removed this ring to silence them. I thought I was defending you. I know now that you were already standing. I merely arrived late." Evelina looked at him. His face was open in a way she had never seen before. "I have spent years living beside locked rooms," he said. "You opened one without asking permission. That sounds like an accusation." "It is gratitude." Her fingers closed around the ring. "What do you want me to do with it?" "Whatever you think it deserves." She looked at the ring, then at the room, at the people who had laughed, at the people who had watched, at the people who now wished to be seen admiring her because admiration had become safer than mockery. She placed the ring on the subscription book, not beside her name this time. "Beside the new trust. Let it stay where everyone can see it," she said. "And let everyone remember that a name is only worth honoring when it protects those with none." Cassian's eyes softened. Lord Harrogate turned away first. Lady Beatrice looked close to tears, though Evelina did not trust tears that arrived late. When the meeting ended, Cassian found Evelina on the terrace outside. The air was cold. Stars trembled over the dark garden. "You wore the dress," he said. "Yes." "I am glad." She looked at him, surprised. "Are you? It brought you through the worst room of your life without surrendering your dignity. It deserved to return victorious." For a moment, she could not speak. Then she looked out over the garden. "My father was not brave at first." "No, but he saved the truth." "Yes, your wife tried to reveal it." Cassian's voice softened. "She did." "And you?" He stood beside her. "I am learning from all of you." The honesty of that settled gently between them. Not a proposal. Not yet. Not a grand declaration beneath chandeliers. Only a man and a woman standing in winter air after secrets had finally been dragged into light. Evelina looked at his bare hand. "Will you wear the ring again?" "No." "Never?" "Not as it was." She nodded. After a while, he said, "May I walk you home? You may walk beside me." A small smile touched his mouth. "That is better." They left Penmere Hall through the side gate, not the grand entrance. The road was dark, but not frightening. Their footsteps moved together over frost and gravel. Neither spoke for a long time. Evelina did not need to count window panes, or press her thumb into her wrist, or pretend laughter did not hurt. The silence was different now. Not empty, shared. Behind them, in the bright hall, the Duke's ring lay open on the book for everyone to see. Before them, the road bent toward morning. And for the first time in many years, Evelina Hart walked without feeling invisible. So tell me, did the Duke do enough by exposing his own family's secret, or should Evelina have refused his help after the humiliation at the ball? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you love emotional Regency stories filled with hidden family secrets, public revenge, and slow-burn romance, subscribe for the next story.